I'm going to read Candle Iron by Sally Odgers, an Australian author. The prologue is called Snare and takes place at summer climb, the first moon of the year of the hound. She was waiting by the thicket, dressed in the blue and silver robes and braided hood of a healer. From her belt hung a tapestry bag and an ornamental knife with a hilt of bone and a blade of glinting metal. It was not of Macanaran design, but that was not surprising, since the woman was not from Macanaran either. Nor was she really a healer. She flexed her fingers and glanced at the climbing moon. Not long now. She had set her snare. Soon it would be sprung, and she would have the treasure in her hands. The lad had agreed to meet her at moon high, which suited her as well as it suited him. And here he came, racing his shadow across the grass. Behind him scampered a hound. The light of the moon shone down on his face, pale and drawn beneath the gleaming hair. He was thin and quiet, and he suffered from cruel dreams that disturbed his sleep and haunted his waking hours. That was why he had come to the travelling fair. She had seen at once that this was the chance she'd been waiting for all her life, the chance of power. "I can take your dreams, pluck them out of your head," she had promised, "but you must pay my price." "Anything, dame. I cannot live like this. Everyone thinks I'm going mad." She had told him her price, trying to hide her eagerness. He hadn't liked it, but she was coming now to pay. He was coming now to pay. And when he had paid, she would take the dreams from his head, just as she'd promised. And in their stead she would leave a living nightmare. Part 1. Siege. Chapter 1. Bloodline. Winterwane, the 10th month of the moon, the 10th moon of the year of the hound. "We can't hold out much longer, Aliso." Merritt's voice was little more than a thread-like whisper, and Aliso had to bend close to hear what he said. "We can't hold out," he repeated. "This castle is going to fall." Merritt was Aliso's uncle, and both of them were of the blood of Torm. Merritt often used to say that they were the blood of Torm, for there was no one else to carry on the line. The Torm blood family had never been large, and now it had dwindled to just these two, a middle-aged man and a girl. "I used to think I might have a child one day," Merritt would sometimes say, "but it never happened. It seems it's left to Aliso to carry on the blood." The two were alike in many ways. Both had the gilden skin and bronze hair of the Torm bloodline. Both had the same gold hazel eyes. In colour and feature they were similar, but the resemblance between them ended there. Merritt Tormblood was as tall and strong as a stonewood tree, but Aliso was more like a honeybark sapling, very slight and skinny for a girl who was nearly 14. Folk shook their heads and whispered that the blood must be weak if Aliso was the best heir it could produce. Merritt always put them right about that. "And what," he demanded, "has weakness to do with size? It's the brain and the heart that count, not the body that houses them. And besides," he would add with a grin, "small folk have a practical advantage. They can last much longer in a siege." "Is that true?" asked Aliso the first time she'd heard him say it. Her lack of stature had been a trial to her for as long as she could remember. Strangers always thought she was a child of 11 or so, and thinking her so young, they tended to speak over her head or past her, as if she didn't matter. It was very galling, for Aliso had ideas and opinions of her own. "Is it true that small people are useful in a siege?" "Is it true that small people are useful in a siege?" she'd asked again. Even Merritt, who knew her age to the hour, was sometimes inclined to forget to answer her. He'd answered her this time, though. "Very useful," he'd said with his lazy, gleaming smile. "Small folk don't eat so much as their larger brothers. They can also slip away into corners and out through windows and tunnels and not be seen. Big ones like me are much too easy for the enemy to find." The idea that Merritt could have an enemy had made Aliso laugh at the time. Merritt was such a favourite with everyone. The castlers loved him, and even the folk of the villages thought him a better lord than most. But of course she wasn't laughing now. Disaster had come to Torm, and no one was laughing. All her life, Merritt had been strong and proud and fearless. Now, Since that shocking midwinter of less than a moon span before, he was helpless, weak and ailing. Eliso fetched some food from the buttery, but Merritt refused it. "How can I eat when my castlers are starving?" "If you don't eat, you'll die," she said sharply, "and that means that Torm will fall. I can't hold it, since I'm not a mystery yet, so what will happen to your castlers then? And what will happen to me?" If Merritt died, Eliso would be the last of the blood, and thanks to the hints that healer hilts had dropped, she had a nasty notion of what would happen if the invaders managed to catch her. Lord Tombs and Lord Shields could win the castle and lands, but if one of the blood went free, they could never be sure of holding what they'd won. She was not a mystery yet, but how could they risk what she might become, and the support she might gather in years to come? "Torm will fall whether I live or die," sighed Merritt. Eliso clenched her hands. He was weak and ill, but why did he have to sound so resigned? It wasn't like Merritt to be resigned. He was the one who'd made things happen his way. "There must be something we can do. You're the one who says we must never give up." "Truth must be faced, no matter how ugly its visage," said Merritt. His long face was sallow and greyed beneath its usual golden tan, and his eyes were almost closed. He'd given up on himself and Torm, which meant he'd given up on her as well. Eliso had never felt so lonely. "You can make things right," she said desperately. "You must." But Merritt was in despair. Eliso sat by his bedside and chewed her knuckles. Her heart hammered as she listened to the muted sounds of the castle. Torm was her home and her heritage, yet Torm was rotten and about to fall. The rot had entered the castle over 6 moonspans before. It was winter wane now, as hope was dying, but the trouble had come with the bright, high summer days. Chapter 2, Soulbinder. Takes place in high summer, the 3rd moon of the year of the hound. All that running noise is my cat doing laps under the bed. He's getting his exercise in. Torm was a Northlands castle, perched on a jutting outcrop at the upper edge of the great Macanaran plain. The plains were rich with minerals and natural wealth, but the Macanaran people preferred a simple life. Their herds and flocks were thriving. Their garner beasts were few, but carried ample flesh. Their holdings bore plenty of fruit and grain. The straw-cat's nest were overflowing with eggs. There was enough to feed themselves and to trade with travellers and with the folk at the castle. The excess they stored in barns, with chinks in the walls to let the air breathe through. High to the northwest lay the pass into the bleak land of Ankur, and over the ocean were the desert lands of Ragan. Each was ruled by sterner laws and much more rigid customs. Each had more than its share of rebels and malcontents. Macanaran, said Merritt, was fairer than either land and beholden to neither. Macanaran ruled itself by the old-time law of favour and obligation, and most of its citizens were very well satisfied. Especially satisfied, said Merritt proudly, were the folk of Torm. Travellers were always well received at Torm. The beds and board of the castle were open to lords and villagers, traders, herders, and bards. It was said that Merritt welcomed all, bowed to no one, and feared nothing. And that was where Merritt had made a rare mistake. He should have been afraid, and he should not have welcomed the dark-eyed woman who came to the castle gates that high summer eve. Later it seemed like an omen that the Soulbinder had come at high summer and struck her fiercest blow on midwinter day. We should have known, said Eliso much later. There should have been some way of keeping her out. Yet, how could the castlers have known the dame was trouble? She was drab and dour enough, but she rapped on the gate like any other traveller. A bed for the night, porter, and the best your kitchens have to offer, she called. It seemed a little demanding for one who looked so shabby, and perhaps that was why Beneathi, the handsome porter, gave her a closer examination than he would usually have done. Beneathi had been travelling for half his life, and keeping the gate of Torm for the other half. He summed up most folk in a glance, then he let them in and out with a bow and a flashing smile. But the sight of this woman sent a shiver down his back. He gave her a second, more thoughtful look, for she was not like the folk who usually came to Torm, nor was her page like others of his calling. Beneathi thought most pages were cheeky brats. That didn't bother him much, since he'd once been a cheeky brat himself. This page seemed to have no cheek, nor any personality at all. He stood as solemn and unblinking as any statue, and not a statue beneath he would have wanted to put in his courtyard. His dark hair was tied back in a leather thong, and his blue eyes were blank and staring. Blind? Daft? Hexed? Beneath he shivered again. The woman rapped impertinently on the gate. A crystal flashed on her finger, and beneath he caught his breath. The jewel was fine, but it seemed to glisten with menace. He turned away before he could be dazzled. "Wait," he said. "I must ask Lord Merritt first." He tugged the signal wire to jangle a bell high in the castle, then climbed the steps to the watchtower. He tried to move with his usual dignity, but the cold wind of dread seemed to be pressing against his back. Merritt emerged unhurriedly from his quarters. "What's amiss, Beneathy? You look ruffled." He smiled his lazy smile. "Has a flight of dragons come out of the north? If so, you must bid them to supper. Trader Moore would have welcomed new tales to tell." "We have travellers, Lord Merritt," said Beneathy, ignoring the joke. "Come out of Ancourt by the looks of them." Merritt glanced down at the gates. "A long journey for a dame and a lad, unless they have garner beasts," he'd commented. "What makes you think they are Ancourian? Are they wearing those ridiculous birth chains, or do they bear the emblem of one of the 9 castles?" "If they do, I didn't notice, but the dame sounds foreign, and the page said nothing at all," said Beneathy. "There's something very wrong with both of them. Shall I send them away?" Merritt hitched his eyebrows in surprise. "Why would you send them away? Since when has Torm hospitality been so grudging?" "I don't care for that dame," said Beneathy shortly. "She is pinched and mean, and the boy looks half amazed." "She cannot help her face, and the lad must be tired after his journey," said Merritt. His smile had faded, and a certain grimness came over his features. "Stop your havering and let them in, Beneathy." "But, Merritt, perhaps I should hire someone less timid and less prone to superstition to hold the gates of Torm, suggested Merritt. Beneathy gave a slight, offended bow and departed. "What has ruffled my friend Beneathy's crest?" Trader Moore, a regular visit to Torm, had come to the watchtowers with his grey cat sprawled across his shoulders like a living shawl. "Nothing important, Moore," said Merritt, relaxed and amused again. "Beneathy mislikes the look of that dame down there, and would have kept her out. I just had to remind him, gently, who is Lord of Torm, and whose opinion need be upheld." Flipping back his light high summer mantle, he pointed down from the tower. Trader Moore narrowed his eyes against the brightness, and his smile died. "Perhaps Beneathy has a point, Lord Merritt." "What's the matter, Trader Moore?" asked Aliso. "Do you know these people?" Moore shrugged, lifting a hand to steady his cat as he turned away from the wall. "Just one moment," he said, and he crossed to the interior stair. "Dag, will you please come up?" When Trader Dag had joined them, Moore nodded down toward the gate. "Do you see that dame and her page, Dag?" "Stars that burn!" Dag sounded just as unhappy about the new arrival as Moore had been. This seemed odd to Aliso, for traders were usually only too pleased to see potential customers, and Dag and Moore were pleasant and a popular pair. "Who is that dame, Merritt?" asked Moore. His fingers caressed the cat, and Aliso thought they seemed to tremble a little. She looked more closely and saw a dampness gleam in the cat's grey fur. A prickle of unease touched her neck. "I haven't a notion, Moore," said Merritt. "I haven't asked her name, but it seems that you and Dag disapprove of our guests just as much as Beneathy does." He laughed. "Do you fear their disguised high traders come to snatch your profits?" "Trade is trade, Lord Merritt," said Dag, offended. The traders of Fielding have no fear of competition." "Then what's the problem? You both look as long-faced as a lame Walloon." Moore was still stroking his cat, and it began to purr down low in its throat. It should have been a friendly and soothing sound, but Aliso backed away. Was it a purr? Or was it more of a growl? And couldn't Merritt see there was something wrong? Beneathy thought so, as did Moore and Dag, and even the cat. "That dame is a soul-binder," said Moore. "What's that?" asked Aliso. "Mr. Aliso," began Dag. He stopped short and glanced at Merritt as if for guidance. "Tell me," she insisted. "What's a soul-binder? And why are you all so afraid?" I wouldn't say afraid so much, said Moore. I would, said Dag, frankly. Tell me, repeated Alysso. She was getting tired of having to wait for explanations. Go ahead, said Merritt lazily. It's just one more superstition. Stars, why must folk forever invent these shadows and wraiths? Can't they find enough in the real world to trouble them? Moore sighed. A soulbinder is a hex mistress, my child. A peddler of charms and potions. This one was driven out from Clare Village, said Dag. He turned his large, dark eyes to Moore. And well did she deserve it. How harsh you sound, said Merritt. Why should a dame be driven out for a matter of charms and moonshine? Moore smiled grimly. I could tell you tales of soulbinders that would make your hair tingle on your scalp. Tales of the real world, too. If hexes and charms don't have their effect, be sure their potions will. I've known of men whose guts were twisted into knots so fast they bled. More. Dag's voice was low and reproving. Mistress Alysso will not wish to hear such things. Better not at that, said Moore. So I'll merely add, this dame wears a ring that is set with what looks like a gem of power. What is that? Asked Alysso. But before Moore could answer, Merritt said impatiently, Your tales are always thrilling, Trader Moore, but best heard at the supper table. If this dame was driven out of Clare, then that is all the better reason to make her welcome here. I would reconsider if I were in your boots, said Moore, or at least have a spellhound inspect her. There was trouble in Clare, you know. Children sickened, flocks went poor. You are not in my boots, said Merritt decidedly. You tend to your trading, Moore, and leave Tom's welfare to me. And as for a spellhound, there is none here and never will be. It would be a good precaution. And while folk wait on a hound to tell them what they should be considering for themselves, real evil would come, and they'd be caught unwary. Merritt must have heard his voice rising and becoming passionate, for he corrected himself with his usual laugh. And all I really mean to say is that we at Torm will never deal in such a foolish superstition. Excuse me, traders, while I greet our latest guests. He bowed and left, treading unhurriedly down the steps toward the gates. And so we are scolded, said Moore, after a moment. I've never seen our lordly host in such a spate. Merritt really hates to hear about things like hexes and charms, said Alysso. You know his manservant, Gregory? Of course, said Moore, a pleasant lad, with more wit between his ears than most his age. His mother Gill was my nurse when I was a babe, said Alysso. She was born in Ancor, so she wears a birth chain for luck. Merritt's always scolding her about it. He pretends it's a joke, but he really means it, I think. She caught herself up, realizing vaguely that she really shouldn't be talking about the Lord of Torm to his guests. But never mind that now. She leaned over the watchtower parapet and peered with interest at the woman and her page. The boy looked about 15, and she hoped he might be friendly. Some pages were happy to talk to the heir of Torm, but others ignored her once they saw how small and slight she was. More than one had called her a scrawny lad. Corrected, they tended to be offended, as if she had fooled them by design. The woman did not look very grand. What could such a dame have done to get herself banished? What did she do? Asked the traders. That dame down there. It's better not to know, Mistress Alysso, said Dag. Better to keep dark things for yourself. Better to keep dark things for when you are older. If you don't want to explain, you shouldn't have mentioned it, said Alysso sharply. And don't you call me Mr. Alysso, Trader Dag. I am not a Mistra yet, but neither am I a babe. Tell me about this soulbinder. Why was she driven out? Did she steal that gem on her finger? Did she smile too often at some wealthy wedded lord? And what do you mean when you called it a gem of power? She looked expectantly at Moore, who was a famous gossip, but he shook his head. All we know, he said, is that a soulbinder dame was driven out of Clare Village, leaving a great deal of trouble in her wake. This one matches the description well enough to make me most uneasy. As for the gem of power, no doubt Merritt would call it superstition, but the tale of the gems is old and once well known. Some are little but luck charms, like the birth chain Mistress Gill wears, but others command the power of the ages and work their will. But what do they do? Asked Alysso. She could see that Moore meant to tell her the tale in full, and would probably use the rolling bardic language that employed 6 words where 2 or 3 would have done. Let me see if I recall it correctly, said Moore. He closed his eyes for a moment. Ah, I have it. The gem of time is that which gives mastery over the years that were and are to come, while the gem of truth is that which is always held by a seer who is the strongest in the land. The gem of... It's time we were on our way, said Dag abruptly. My mister expects me home soon after high summer. Mort smiled slightly and switched to his everyday mode of speech. Seems I'm fated not to tell you the tale this time, Aliso. Ask me again next time we meet. Yes, Dag, I'm coming. A few heartbeats more or less can't make much of a difference to your mister. The Travers left the watchtower, but Aliso remained, leaning over the parapet to watch as Merritt greeted the sinister stranger. I bid you welcome, dame. Aliso pulled a little face. Merritt was a fine and gracious host, but his manner was sometimes too charming. What if the woman thought he was mocking her? What if it were not just traitor tales, and she were truly dangerous? She leaned a little further, peering down. You are weary and worn, continued Merritt. You are welcome to partake of food and shelter with us at Castle Torm. You welcome us, Merritt Tormblood? The woman's voice was strong, with a ring of metal about it, and Aliso could hear as plainly as she heard her uncle. That I do. And how deep is your welcome, Merritt of Torm? Is it deep and wide enough for folk from far away? My welcome is as deep as the great ocean of the south, said Merritt grandly, as high as the shrouded mountain. My welcome is as wide as the desert of Ragan, and firm as the castle of Torm. Does that please you, dame? Prettily spoken, said the woman, but pretty words cannot be eaten or wrapped around for warmth. Do you really mean the words you offer me? Aliso drew in a sharper breath. The woman had almost accused her uncle of lying. Couldn't she understand the hyperbole of a classic Tormblood greeting? As if she felt Aliso's shocked gaze, the soulbinder glanced up at the watchtower. Her eyes glinted like pitch, and Aliso felt cold. She stepped quickly away from the parapet and out of the soulbinder's line of sight. On any other occasion she would have been annoyed if guests had seen her dressed in her rubbed hide leggings and a shabby overshirt. But this time she was relieved. If the woman had seen her staring, she would think her nothing but an ill-mannered serving girl. After the soulbinder and her page had vanished into the castle, Aliso clattered down the stairs from the watchtower, across the well yard, and up to her own high chamber. Quickly she braided her hair into a coronet. She'd been doing that lately in an effort to appear her true age. Merritt had complimented her gravely, but Gregory, her friend, had smiled a bit uneasily and offered to crop it off for her instead. A lot Gregory knew of hair and style, she thought, as she changed into a cress-green tunic and a matching cap. She surveyed herself briefly in the looking-glass, pulled a face at her skinny reflection, and went along the passages to the main castle. On the way she passed Moore and Dag, who bowed at her gravely and said their farewells. Aren't you staying for supper? She asked in surprise. I'd like to hear the rest of the tale, Trader Moore. Not this time, Mistress Aliso, said Dag. We leave for Fielding tonight. Don't call me mistress, said Aliso firmly. I keep telling you I am not one. You will be when you're grown, said Dag with equal firmness. Meanwhile, you are the heir of Torm and deserve our courtesy. Tell Merritt to look for us next high summer, if not before, said Moore. Aren't you afraid of meeting trail thieves if you travel by night? Not, said Moore with a wry twist to his handsome mouth, so afraid as Dag is of sharing a roof and table with a soulbinder. He hitched his cap more closely over his shoulder. Grayson doesn't care for the dame either, he added, and that's good enough for me, even if Dag did not agree. He turned and looked seriously at Aliso. Child, tell Merritt to have a care what pledges he makes that dame. If he offers her something, he really must deliver. Otherwise... Otherwise what? Prompted Aliso. Moore shook his head. Otherwise she may take what was offered several hundredfold. We must be going, said Dag. Goodbye, said Aliso. Moore's warning sounded grave, but why warn her instead of going to Merritt? It was very puzzling. Moore gave her a slightly mocking bow. At your service always, heir of Torm. Later, Aliso wished she had begged the traders to speak with Merritt before they left, but on that high summer eve she'd simply smiled and waved as they passed through the gates of Torm, and put the warning off to one side of her mind. that will do for tonight. I'm tired and stumbling my words. Hopefully I'll read the next chapter tomorrow. Good night.